Welcome to the Elite GTM and revlogic Academy's very first development session. This academy is built on one powerful belief. Growth isn't just a goal, it's a mindset. In today's session, we're diving deep into what it truly means to be coachable, how humility, hunger, and the right mindset are the keys to unlocking elite performance. We've partnered with revlogic to ensure this academy sets the standard, and today I'm joined not only by revlogic CEO and the co-founder Rick Kickert, but also two of the most respected leaders in the go-to-market world. This session is your starting point, your introduction to the why behind this academy, the power of coaching and how purposeful learning can transform your career trajectory. To guide you, we're honored to have Luca Lazzaron, a two-time CRO, strategic advisor to Iconic, the VC, and a master of building high-performing revenue teams. Jeremy Duggan, investor, advisor, and former GM of EMEA at AppDynamics, president at Multiverse, where he has helped drive some of the most successful exits in software history. So let the learning begin, and welcome all to this first session.
Thanks, Daragh.
Thank you, Daragh.
Can I just say before we start that I'm a bit irritated that you made me come on here with an Italian, because I'm normally the coolest person in the room, and the Italians are just effortlessly cool, and it's really tough for me to up my game. And I'll tell you a little story about Luca, right? Once when we worked together, it was back at BMC. He came into a meeting and he was wearing a pair of red suede loafers with tassels on them. And I looked at him and he looked so cool. And I couldn't believe that anyone could look cool wearing stuff like that. So I thought to myself, I'm going to go get a pair of them. I got a pair, wore them to the pub that Saturday night, and I had to leave after an hour in shame because everybody was calling me Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, right? So you're sticking me on a call with an Italian just to upset me before we even get started.
You see,
apologies.
This is Jeremy Duggan at his best selling. So he basically starts setting the tone, very humble way, this, and now everybody already loves him because obviously you feel empathy, for the guy. You're such a rock star, mate.
Yeah. Yes. And antipathy and a little bit of fury towards the guy who humiliated me with his red moccasins. So it's a win for me at the start of this.
Luca, did you say humble? Is that what I heard you just say?
He is humble. He's super humble.
You got to be really great to be humble.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
you have to keep us in order because we can keep going this way for a couple of
hours. I know, don't worry. I'll cut you off. I know how to control an agenda. You've taught me well, Luca. Let's get started on a very important question. And it's something I've listened to podcast after podcast with both of you in it. And you both talk a lot about how top performers are maniacal about learning. Well, why do you think that is?
You want to go, mate?
So why the top performers are really focused on learning? That's the question, yes.
Yeah.
And so well, me and Luca used to joke about this when we worked together, and we said that the first point is because that we're stupid, right? And so what happens when you're not that smart is you know that you don't know a lot of things, and so that was certainly for me when I started in this business at PTC. I joined and I looked around. The rooms I was in, and I realized that I just knew nothing compared to anybody. And if I wanted to have any chance of not at that stage being successful, but just keeping my job, I knew that I needed to learn and to get as much knowledge as I could to make sure that I could make the steps that I wanted to do in the company. But then as I got older and worked with a lot of really fantastic people, I realized my thought was that the number one reason I think that why the top performers are maniacal about losing is they're terrified of failing, right? And it's a consistent, call it a quality. Sometimes it's a quality, sometimes it's a pain, but a consistent theme that everybody has who really is focused on development. Because I break it down by thinking like everybody loves to win, right? Everybody. There's not a room you'll go into where they won't say that, but not everybody is terrified of losing. And if you're terrified of losing, then it will drive in you a continual goal of getting better and better. And the reason I think behind that is that the best people I've ever worked with, it's not easy developing yourself all the time, because you know when you're developing, it's painful, and you're always out your comfort zone, and it's not a comfortable scenario. Whereas when you're not learning and you're living in your comfort zone, right, you've got a lot of security, because everything you know that you're doing, you know how to do it, because you're staying in the same place. And so I always think, you know, I know a lot of people. There's a girl I worked with at Multiverse, the company you just mentioned, called Pepper Wise. And she was the first person I hired at Multiverse as a sales rep, right? And she was, I remember at the time when I interviewed her, she had very little experience, really young kid, she's probably about 23, 24. But the second interview, I thought she was one of the best people I had ever interviewed, because all through the interview, she was asking questions and trying to find out more and more things. And so when she got into the company, she asked me to go out with her on a first meeting. I remember I'm the president of the company, and she's a salesperson in the company. So she's got the courage to kind of go, look, I want to get out with this guy and see what can happen. And I never forget this first meeting. It was kind of a disaster, right? It was the CEO of a really big company, and the prep wasn't great, and the questions weren't going. It just didn't go very well. And we went for a coffee in a local, you know, bar afterwards. And she asked me how it went, and I said, well, how do you think it went? And she said, it was a disaster, and I want you to tell me and leave nothing out, all the things that I did wrong, right? I said, are you sure? I'll like dress it up nice if you want. She said, nope, I want it straight. So I told her all the things that had gone wrong. And I remember she was sat in this coffee bar. She had a book out. She took notes on everything, right? Didn't have any arguments about it. Asked a few qualifying questions, and then we left. 2 days later, she calls me up and she wants to go on another call with me, right? Straight away. So again, the courage to go back and try and learn again. And she'd put, I think there's 5 or 6 things doing wrong. She'd put every single one of them right in that 2 days for the next meeting. And then she did the same again. Take you to a coffee place, tell me where I went wrong. And you know, now she's late 20s, VP of sales for Multiverse, got a $250 million quota, you know, and just an amazing story. But it all came from her, from this desire to go into a place where she was going to be uncomfortable, go to a place where she was going to be out of a comfort zone and learn every single day that she possibly could, because she wanted to be the best. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. That was. Luca?
He touched so many important points, Jeremy, right? And him and I share this incredible pressure we always put on ourselves, thanks to the fear of failure. You know, we were always scared to fail, but that was actually, you know, an engine for us to get better. And back to the question, there are a couple of other stuff, because I think Jeremy touched all the right points. But if you look at the top performers, since we were kids, think about when you were at school. Who were the top performers? Who was getting the best grades? Typically the people that were studying more. They put more work, more effort, you know, and they were trying to learn, you know, deeper the things and faster. And then when we start going to our, you know, sport activity, you know, very similar thing. Obviously there is some natural talent, but then if you actually goes into any activity that you're doing with your eyes wide open, you're going to find out that in any activity is either, you know, business, sport, college, university, anything. The top performer are the one that actually put more effort in being better prepared than the other. They put more training, they study more than the other. They actually try to get, you know, from anybody that they meet and suck some information from them and actually then apply that, like the example that Jeremy brought with the rep of Multiverse. And the interesting thing is that goes on for their entire life. The work I'm doing right now, there is and I can mention her because she's amazing, the CEO of Pigment, she's French, I don't know. And, you know, when we sat down, and she's really a student of the game, and she has a phenomenal background on finance, and then she understands very well engineering, the office of the CEO that they sell to, but she's learning now, you know, what, you know, great sales organization looks like. And every time we sat down, she takes 2 pages of notes, exactly like the rep, you know, the first rep that, you know, in Multiverse, And this is the common thing that you're going to find from these top performers when they get the first job to probably when they run their own company, right? They're always eager to learn because that's the only way to become a top performer. From when we were at school to actually running a company.
Awesome. Those are both great stories. Great stories of just people wanting to become great, learning more, be top performers. So next question I just have, because it's kind of near and dear to my heart, because I spent a lot of time, built a career around developing and delivering training, and I got to ask you, how has a focus on development really impacted your careers, which are both incredible? Just start with you, Luca. You have an example of how development has impacted your career?
I didn't know anything, Rick. I just didn't know anything, right? So I didn't know how to, I literally didn't know. My first job in PTC, after college, I took a, degree in economics, but then I got a job, and McMahon mentioned this a number of times when he hired a frozen food kid, right, selling chips, whatever. And that was me, because my first job was running actually for a very well-known and great company, Bofrost, that was delivering frozen food door to door. And I took the job of managing the local branch. And then you say, at the end, you ended up in PTC. And because I was working 24/7, not making money, managing 30 people from 5:30 a.m. in the morning to 9, because people have to get branch, load the truck, all this stuff. Anyway, and then I had a couple of friends that they saw me when we were going out, for a pizza, not at the pub, I'm not in London. So, and they saw me tired. I saw this guy showing up with a nice car, relax, right? And telling me story how great this company is. So he made a referral to me. And the first guy that got a referral, first line manager, saw this. Oh, he works in Bofrost, nothing to do with this work. And he trashed it. So my opportunity was gone before even starting. The week later, another friend of mine was a friend of the second line manager. This is a true story, a Massimo. And he made the same referral. So now the second line manager put down the referral of this guy to apply for a rep interview to the first line that already trashed my CV. And so the guy was forced to actually meet me. And then because it was the end of the year, Jeremy knows this, in PTC at that time, they were as aggressive on forecast as on recruiting, and they had to hire someone. They rushed me through the process. You can hear now, I barely speak English now. Imagine that 27 years ago, right? And so they rushed me through the process, and I made it through. I had no idea. I heard my dad talking because he was leading a tool machinery company about CAD/CAM, and I knew what typically it looks like, the office of the engineers, on working on the CAD/CAM, computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing for the youngest listening to this that they may not know. But I didn't know anything. So the only way for me was to learn what the hell was this, who were we selling? And then I was incredibly lucky to jump into a company that in other things probably had other flaws, but they gave me immediately this sense of accountability for your own development, of taking training seriously. Yeah. Jeremy knows this very well. When we were sent to Waltham, we had to show up prepared. There was some homework. When we were in boot camp, if you were not prepared, you were sent back. We can argue about this, right? Not fired, sent back. You had another opportunity to then come. But then your manager would have been called and say, hey, Luca did not show up prepared. He did not take this seriously. We put him on a freaking plane from Padua to Boston and took all this cost, and he's not taking it seriously. By the way, that did not happen, okay? So I'm explaining.
Good to hear.
But that actually put into my DNA since the beginning, how that was fundamental to be able to compete, because there was a fierce competition in trying to win and get better and be better also than the other. But also how to take this seriously. And then, then it became fun. And I think now we, both Jeremy and I, experience how we love to coach people because we saw the value when we were coached. Yeah. That was a freaking long answer. Sorry, Jeremy.
Hey, Luca, I didn't know about your origin story. From frozen foods to legend of tech sales.
I think
What a story, Luca!
I think John put it on the book as well, or he keeps saying the story, right? So, and obviously he made it even more dramatic than what it was.
That's inspiration
Well,
right there.
I mean, it really is, and you know, but like following on from that, if I'm asked how it's helped my career, I mean, Luca and I share similar backgrounds in that we came from, you know, from humble backgrounds, and worked our way into the positions that we got into. And I can honestly say now, if anybody ever asks me, you know, the number one reason behind, you know, any success I've had, I would say it would be development, and it would be development in two areas. It would be the development of myself, right? So, you know, when we were at PTC, and then you know, from PTC, Luca and I didn't know each other, but we worked really closely together at BladeLogic and BMC. We wouldn't just get training and development from the companies. We'd also self-develop, right? So a lot of, you know, things that people talk about in the market now, like value pyramids and, you know, 3 Ys and leading indicators and those kind of things, they were things that a group of us got together to solve problems that we had. So we'd say, well, how come all of these people are doing, you know, really well and some of these aren't? Let's figure out why, and that's how leading indicators came about. Value pyramids came about from saying we need a bigger hit rate on our new business meetings. So let's go and understand how we think we could get, you know, improve that. And the value pyramid was born. And so, you know, that allowed, you know, a lot of us to kind of really elevate our game as almost ICs or first line managers, right? Now, then what happened is, so that was game changing, certainly for me, I probably for Luca as well. But then what happens is you then get into leadership, and, you know, again, Luca and I were really, you know, similarly aligned in this, which was that we loved the opportunity to make people better, right? It was something that we really, it was why we wanted to get into leadership, right? Because there's a lot, you know, more challenges and more hassle and more heartache when you do that. And so you can't make people better if you don't know what great looks like. So the kind of development that we've had as individual contributors helped us to be better leaders. And then the final thing I'll say on this, which is a little bit more touchy-feely, is if I look back on my career, the biggest pride I have is the work that I've done and Luca's done and McMahon's done and people like McCluskey and Cedric Pesh and all these people have done to change the lives of so many people, including our own. And those changes in people's lives, they only come from development, right? From taking somebody at a starting point, wherever that may be, and proactively helping them to learn and develop and get better every single day until you're, you know, oftentimes unrecognizable professionally and oftentimes personally from who you were. And that's how you change your life if you can do that. And it's also how you can change the lives of people around you. And I think, you know, I look at the people I grew up with and who've had a lot of success. They've changed their lives and they've created legacies by having that focus on their own development and the development of all the people around them in a way that's given them just an amazing life. And so I'd say it's the number one reason any of us have had any success, really. Have I gone over the top there, Luca? Would you agree with that?
I agree 100%. And there is something I think that you've always been doing in a phenomenal way, that sometimes not sometimes, I think oftentimes you probably believe more into the individual and growing that person that individual probably believe in yourself.
Right.
I think that is if you are listening to this and you are in leadership, you have this responsibility to not just inspire, coach, and inspect the fundamentals that, you know, with Jeremy, you know, we always preach, but to actually let the people that work with you to believe in themselves and giving them the tools or the path and the training, all those things. Because sometimes I saw people actually doing amazing things and then coming back that, you know, and saying, well, I didn't know that was possible for me to do it. I think we were lucky to have John, for example, inspiring us, you know, earlier on in our career for this. But if you are in leadership, you gotta enjoy that and inspiring people and letting them realize that everything is possible. If a guy from Padua and a guy from Newcastle can do what we did, anybody can.
True.
Love that.
True.
It's not.
No, I agree. You talk about like we just talked about like how development like impacted your careers, and I suppose you went straight into what development or that first mindset is. With all your experience in so many accomplished roles between both of you, how do you both stay in that learning mode, even when others look at you as an expert, and I suppose you feel like experts yourselves?
I'm going to do a very quick answer because I'm going to repeat what Jeremy said at the beginning, fear of failure. Fear of failure. I am sure that Jeremy, like me, prepared a bunch of notes for these things that we are doing to make sure that we show up prepared. We did a prep call yesterday. I don't want to fail. And the only way is to, keep learning and focus and don't cut corners and don't think that, I know how to do this. Being comfortable doing is one story. Being prepared on what matter in that moment is another story. And for that, you gotta keep, learning and preparing yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, 100%, Luca, and I also think that it's like intellectually exciting, right? That when a problem comes up, right, that people don't think can be solved, that you come up with a way to solve it, right? So that's what, Luca, you used to talk to me all the time about having a development first mindset. And I think one of that is being open to learning new ideas. And one of them is when a problem comes along, right, that people haven't been able to solve, and you sit down at first and just say, do you know what? I think we can figure out a way to solve that, right? And think of new ways that you can do, and then when you do them, then you can start adding to the playbook. Like some of the things I mentioned before that were, were tools and content and ideas that were created to solve a problem that other people hadn't solved, right? So if you've got this development mindset and you're curious about how you can get better and better all the time, you come up with things that other people haven't come up with, and you add them to your playbook, and everybody gets better, and you keep doing that and evolving over time. And that's when, if I look at my career, I don't know if it's the same with you, Luca, but at every job I've gone to, my execution has got a bit better than the last one. And it's because things were added all the time because you never stop learning. And just to add on to Luca's point there about belief, right? I think it's also believing that you can be as good as anybody as well, right? This was always a big thing for me. And when I was a kid, I remember PTC was a really competitive company. And I remember when I joined, my first year started to get pretty good. And I went to an awards ceremony, and there was people on stage getting awards, and I didn't get one. And I was fuming, like a little Geordie lad in the audience going, hang on a minute, you all told me I was going to get fired, and I've done really well. Why aren't I getting any of these awards? And so I was sat there thinking, right, how am I going to get an award next year? And then even, I'll tell you, McMahon he's a little devil, McMahon. Do you remember Blade Logic, Luca? There was a sales guy called Marty Carty. Great sales guy, really great sales guy. I mean, such a good guy. But John McMahon would deliberately go on stage in the early days when guys like me showed up, Lucas showed up, Cedric Pesh showed up, Andy Byron was there, guys he knew were really competitive. And he always used to talk for the first 9 months. He always used to say, hey, we got Marty Carty selling lots of software. I call him the one-man commando unit. And I was sat in the crowd texting Luca going, who's this Marty Carty? Why is he called the one-man commando unit? So we went back to Europe, and there was a film out at the time called Get Carter. I had a strategy called Get Carty, right? and we had a good laugh and joke about it. And Marty, we became great friends, and of course we did. But it's that mindset, that competitive mindset all the time, which is you want to be the best you can be, and you want to try and compete with other people. And when you run your own company, you do it for sport, and that drives the whole company. And I just think having that approach to life, where you're always trying to be better than you are, better than you were yesterday, and then tomorrow you're going to try and be better than you are today. I think it drives the upward surge of people and their abilities and what they can achieve. And I think it's always worth bearing that in mind. Luca, you talked when we last spoke about that 1%, getting 1% better every week, I think you said, or month or year or something like that, how when you compound it all, it makes all the difference.
Yes. So you did that. So I remember, clearly how Jeremy was actually during, I think it was a QBR or something. And he was talking to his team, I think it was Northern Europe at the time, or entire EMEA, I don't remember. And he was saying, okay, we can do better than this. And then he started challenging the team and say, can we be 1% better this week on something? Could be on pipeline, or getting better on learning the product, or getting better on setting the trap for the competition. Can we be 1% better? I'm not asking you to move. Can we do 1%? And obviously everybody feel excited. Yes, we can be 1% better this week. Okay, what about next week? Can we do another 1% and be better on another aspect of the game? And I know. And actually, if you think in that way, in a year, you get 52% better. That is massive. But is this concept of getting better. Now, this is related probably to the next question, Daragh, also, but is the concept of don't let anybody, be better than you because you did not put enough effort. Don't let anybody outwork you, or don't let anybody beating you, because if you work in sales, you want to compete and you want to win, not just compete, right? Because you're not prepared enough. So this spirit, right, since the beginning, this is valid from a new rep to a seasoned rep to a CEO to anybody, of keep getting better every week. Then it's compounding, and then it becomes part of your DNA that you're never going to leave, because you're going to feel bad. You're going to feel guilty if you don't do it. I do feel guilty if I don't do it. If I feel that, okay, did I get better this week on something? Doesn't matter if it is work, golf, family, anything. I say, okay, sounds like a wasted week.
I just need to make a quick timeout point there, which is Luca's done exactly to me just there what I did to him at the start, right? Which is I asked him to tell a story that I thought was from him, and then he turned around and said, actually, Jeremy, this is your story. So he made me look as though I asked him to tell a brilliant story that was actually about how great I am. And I just want to say,
because
for the record,
you're losing memory. You're getting older, so
well,
I was helping you. But it's a true story. It's your story.
I just don't want to come across like an egotistical maniac there, which is, hey, Luca, tell another great story about how great I am.
I said since the beginning that you're humble, so no worry.
Yeah. I think we can definitely see that the mindset of never letting anyone outwork you. I think it was in my first year in recruitment, I realized that I wasn't competing against the team. I was actually just competing against myself. If I was the one, it was me that needed to prove to myself that I could be better every day, every week, every month. I set my own targets. The targets that were set for me, I wanted to overachieve them, and always hit a target that I kept chasing myself. And I think it's definitely down to resilience, your core values. Nobody's going to tell you to pick up the phone to call. Nobody's going to tell you to follow up in an email. You have to do it yourself. It has to be self-motivated. You have to be a self-starter. I think I learned that very quickly from the people that taught me in my previous employment, but also by listening to greats like yourselves, and listening to the podcast and watching you talk to us about how you hire and ICE, intelligence, character, coachability, experience. Realizing I had that in myself actually motivated me to be a better person.
Yeah. No doubt, Daragh.
I love the 1% better, and just the concept of marginal gains. I mean, imagine if you can get every person on your sales team to be 52% better, or even 32% better. The impact, and I know you guys have seen it, and just the productive capacity and what the sales team's delivering, and they're feeding off each other, and they're more competitive, and you got more Marty Cardis. And that was my take. I'm looking up Marty Cardi on LinkedIn here, Jerry.
He's a one-man commando unit.
I love it. One more question, or a couple more here. So, like, just everything around what we're talking about is about being coachable. And from your perspective, what is the most effective way to just apply feedback in order to be more coachable?
Go on, me.
So the question, what what's the right way to be coachable if you
Right. Get in.
Yeah, do you know it's it's a really good question that everybody should think on this, because actually being coachable is the easiest thing in the world if you genuinely want to be, but the hardest thing in the world is if you get your mindset wrong. And so, you know, the reason coachability is a part of the ICE criteria, you know, no, ordinarily I when I was younger, I used to think, well, if somebody's clever and someone's got great character, of course they're going to want to learn. But sometimes people who have those two great characteristics, and this has happened to myself on many occasions, you start to get to a position where you think you know it all. You know, you get a bit cocky, a bit arrogant. You know, maybe you're too busy, and you stop learning and taking feedback. And I think the trick is always to catch yourself in those moments, because, you know, firstly, I always say to myself, you know, in any situation, especially when you're surrounded with great people, you got to be open to the fact that you might not have all the answers, right? And at that point, you've got to stop and start, you know, and realizing that's the current state that you're in. And then when you've got to that point, you've got to listen and like really listen. And this is another thing from McMahon. McMahon was brilliant about this. He used to say you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and nobody uses them in that ratio when you should. So you've got to really listen to the opinions, to other opinions on what you're doing and what the business is doing and how you're doing it. And you've got to do it with all your guards down. You've got to do it without being defensive, and with genuine openness and curiosity to what somebody's saying to you, as opposed to thinking about, you know, how you're going to respond, or thinking about why you don't think it's right, thinking about what your opinion is. You've got to listen with those guards down. And then what I do in those situations, because you get advice sometimes it's not right? But in those situations, then you've got to debate and decide with a really clear head based on facts and logic, right? If the feedback and the ideas and the opinions you've got are right, or are worth acting on, are half right, but it could be made even better by exploring this way, and it gets into a proper brainstorm. But you can get to that point because you're not coming at it from a position of, you know, I want to be right. You're coming at it from a position of what are the facts and logic in this situation, and you know, and how do you know how can I pursue those in the goal of getting to what the truth should be. And then the final part is, once you get to that point, act. Right? You've got to act immediately. And when you learn a new way of doing something, execute it. If it's a big thing, build a playbook, a process around it, so you can get better and better. And that's the process I go in my head when I get to the point where I start getting, you know, uncoachable and things like that.
Awesome. Luca, any example?
Agree on everything. There is another aspect that I learned over the years, right? Talking about the things we learn in different periods of our professional experience, is that, and probably for us, it was a sort of a, you know, given, like, normal thing, but it's not, especially with companies getting bigger. If you work in a little bit larger company than startups or what, is that there is a leadership responsibility in creating a safe environment, because sometimes people is not coachable because they are put on the defense mode since day one. While a safe environment doesn't mean that, oh, you know, it doesn't matter if you don't do this. A safe environment is only a safe in terms of that you can say if you disagree on something, and we can debate things, like Jeremy was saying. And a safe environment is where a leader actually truly feel that her success depends on the success of their reports. So then, if you work in an environment like that, you would take any advice, even the tough one, you know, we call it tough love sometimes, right? Then you're going to take it in the right way, because you know it's coming from a good point, a good side. A situation where, you know, there is an hostile environment, or the competition that is so good to progress becomes unhealthy because people do not behave in the right way, then it's going to create all this defensive mode in which you're not going to listen anymore. So, and I'm telling you this because a couple of times in my life, I found myself going to that stupid behavior or not listening, thinking it was a personal thing versus was an objective thing based on facts. And by the way, there is a great training, a great book on this that probably most of you are aware, Crucial Conversation. And it really teaches you on how to actually have this difficult conversation, give feedback, or how to receive feedback in the right way. I can see.
I'll tell you.
Jeremy
I'll tell
is
you.
loving to say.
No. I was just thinking when you said that, Luca, of a story which I remember. I remember it was in the BMC offices in Amsterdam, and there was you, me, and McMahon. And this is a great example. Just literally came to mind about a leader creating a safe environment and respecting the person who worked for him, which was John, and someone like Luca thinking through facts and logic and not just accepting what his boss was telling him to do. And there was this, and I was sat as a kind of spectator in this discussion, and John had said something, and Luke had gone.
It was a compensation plan.
Was it? Do you remember it?
I have the image. It was one of the meetings downstairs.
Yeah.
Was it?
So yeah, it was. Yeah. So
John
compensation
plan on one specific product. I think we were talking.
Yeah. So Luca says, "I'm not sure I get that, John. Right? About this." And then John said, "Well, here's what I mean." And Luca went, "Yeah, I'm not sure I get that, right? Because of this and this." And John went, "Well, here's what I mean by it." And Luca went, "Yeah, I'm not sure I get that, John." And I was watching this going, "What is going on here?" And then after that, and so that we got a good. And after the meeting, I said to John, "You never normally do that." He asked you this. He said the same thing like 4 times, didn't get it. And he said, "Luca's a really smart guy, and if he's not getting something, I need to understand where he's coming from, because he's probably got a point. And if even if he doesn't get it, nobody else will." And it was a perfect example of Luca not backing down because he thought that something was important, and John respecting him enough to really try and uncover what was going on. And that's it. It came to mind, Luca, because you were talking about creating that environment where it's safe for people to learn and to push back. But the leader having to make sure that they listened and guide it in the right way. And it just came to mind. So I thought I'd tell everybody that story.
It's amazing. And that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, that's what's so important is you have to think about that is like, I have to create that safe environment and that respect back and forth. And you're not going to earn that overnight. That's awesome. Love it.
Yeah, agreed. We're coming to the end of this now. And I want to ask one more question because it's really about why we've created this, an academy. We want to provide training on the sales process, on critical ways to execute. In both your opinions, is there any activity like that typically is an absolute when it comes to like that sort of format, sales process, critical ways to execute, modern ways of thinking, and just keeping sharp and keeping at it?
I don't know if I interpret your question the right way, but for me, always the best way to actually get people better and understanding something and being better prepared on this has always been role playing. Because in the role playing, you simulate the real situation. You can check how someone pitch, or how you handle objection, how so you can see those things. So I think that in every training session, right, or if you have to put together this academy and actually articulate the program, a space for role play in which you make sure that you simulate is down to the concept Jeremy was saying before. You learn something and you act on it. And there is a way to act even, in a training room and simulating the role play on how that is going to work. Again, I don't know if the question was intended to this, but it doesn't matter because I think role playing is important.
Yeah, I don't know what you meant either with the question, Daragh. So you need to sort that out, kid. But I'll answer it in my way as well. So I'll come at it from the perspective. Luke was talking about a way to do the training. I'll talk about it from the perspective of if you're attending training. And I can tell you, like people I've known over the years, people like I mentioned Noah Stevenson in a previous podcast. I just talked about Pepper Wise, guys like Tom Levy and Mike Ernest and Michelle Bove over at Wiz. People that just spring to my mind who I saw develop like quicker than most. You know what they did in training, right? In training sessions, they would sit at the front, and it doesn't matter if there's an 8-person meeting room or a 350-person meeting room. They'd sit at the front. They'd be taking notes all day. And then what separated them was they'd personally follow up with me or whoever the trainer was. they'd then give you a call for advice when they were trying to do something that they said we're going to do. Then they'd give me calls or emails to let me know what worked. They'd do follow-on calls if something didn't work, right? And I always loved taking those calls, because one of the things I always used to think was, look, you can go and train, 1,000 people, and if the training's good, most of them will kind of go away thinking, I got something from that. But maybe 10% will really listen and buy in, and then get busy about executing and execute through the pain. Because anytime you do something new for the first time, and for the first period of time, actually, it's really hard and it's painful and you don't really understand it and you're going to make mistakes, right? But the people who really are going to be great, they push through that, and because they know that there's sunshine at the end of the storm. And the ones that spring to my mind that went the quickest through it are the ones that just they'd go in and they'd commit to the development, they'd commit to the post-development pain, and come out the other end. So that's how I was going to answer your rather vague question, Daragh. I hope I did it justice.
Jeremy,
That's exactly.
Jeremy,
No,
remember the hot seat, and right, you grab a couple of beers at the end of the day with boot camp, and you're always looking for the person that's gonna be the first one to raise their hand and wants to go up in the front and be sitting in that hot seat, like
right.
That person's gonna be good.
Yeah, and it's not a place where people. Yeah, it's not a
Good.
place where they want to go because they're worried about the training. You can look them in the eye for the whole training, can't they? Not everybody likes that, That's how I first got to know Luca with his red suede moccasins on. That's how I got that tip. And it backfired dramatically at the pub on the weekend.
No, 100%. That was the question. That pretty much was the question, was like, what's the one fundamental thing you've seen or you would say that a top performer needs to execute to truly be at the front of it? And
Daragh, you can't backtrack now and re-ask the question based on the answers that were given. Right? It doesn't work like that.
I tried my best. Listen, I want to thank you. I want to thank both of you for taking your time out today. I think anybody that watches this is going to see how invaluable the lessons and the stories are. And that's what I wanted to get across. I think the mindset I've always had has been that you need to learn every day. Every day is a school day. I remember hearing that from my dad when I was just a kid. If you're not learning every day, if you don't take something home from every day, you're not learning, you're not adapting. And what you've both shown today is exactly what I wanted to get across. So thank you very much for taking this time and doing it for us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Great job, Daragh and Rick, and great seeing you again, Luca. Always a pleasure, mate.
Thank you, Daragh. Thank you, Jeremy. We're going to be on a call together now, Jeremy, on another one.
Yeah, that's right.
Ciao, Rick. Ciao, Ollie. Thank you, Whitney. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, Rick.
See you, Jeremy. See you later.
Bye-bye.